paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and I'm just delighted to have you here with me this evening. It's always so good to see so many regular people in the chat. If you have any questions for our guests tonight, we are live. For those of you who are watching at 10 p.m. Central on Saturday night, for those of you who are listening later, you can't ask questions, but still feel free to leave comments. We always like to hear some feedback from you. So please, if you want to ask our wonderful guest tonight anything or me, just drop it in the comments and I'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the show. Now, I'm super excited about tonight's guest. I run a film festival, as many of you know, in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which runs the first March of every year. So this year it's March 3 to 5 in Eau Claire, Wisconsin at the Micon Downtown Cinema, which is our main venue. And tonight's guest is the director of one of the films that we'll be screening. We just announced our first wave of films. If you're interested, you can go to MidWest WeirdFest.com and see the first 7 features that we've announced. There'll be multiple documentaries in the paranormal space, as well as horror, underground, science fiction, fantasy, all kinds of films, probably about 14, 15 features and probably something like 60 or 70 shorts and music videos. It's a lot of fun that weekend. And I love having guests on the show in the lead up to the festival every year who are actually presenting their films at the festival. So tonight's guest is an instructor in the English department at Northern Michigan University. He has presented his creative and scholarly work internationally. His creative work, often hybrid, spans the genres of poetry, music, film, theatre, and the visual arts. Streaking in Tongues, the music project he shares with his son, has released several critically acclaimed albums, most recently Christmas with Bigfoot. His brand new documentary, Bigfoot and Marty, is set to screen at the 7th annual MidWest WeirdFest, as I just mentioned, and it explores the work of two-time UP Poet Laureate and Bigfoot poet, Marty Achatz. The film features poetry readings by Achatz, as well as candid interviews with Bigfoot experts and other mystery hunters, including well-known personalities from the cryptozoological field, like a good friend of the show, Ken Gerhard, who we've had on Talking Weird a number of times, and he's great in the doco. It's always good to see anything that Ken's in. At any rate, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to the show the film's director, Ronnie Ferguson.
Hello.
Greetings, Ronnie.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. It's great having you here. I loved your film. It's always a treat when I get something I don't expect. And this is, as I think I've mentioned in the program notes, or at least the first press release for the first wave announcement from MidWest WeirdFest. It's unlike any other Bigfoot documentary I've ever seen. Can you maybe tell our audience a little bit about the film and how you came up with the idea initially?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate you saying that. It's unlike any Bigfoot documentary you've ever seen.
Uh-huh.
So the reason that is because it really didn't start as a Bigfoot documentary. It really started when I first moved up here to the Upper Peninsula to go to school. I went to a poetry reading, and I was listening to there was a big group of poets. They were all reading that night, like could have been maybe even a dozen. And there was this one poet that really struck me, and I really liked what he was writing, and I didn't know who he was, and so I reached out to him and found out, well, it's Marty Achatz, who I ended up making the film about. And I had heard there'd been whispers. People had told me, there's this guy who writes Bigfoot poetry. And at the time I didn't know it was Marty, because that night I listened to him. He wasn't reading any of his Bigfoot poetry, but when I finally put two and two together, I realized, oh, you're the Bigfoot poet. And he said, well, yeah. And then through that, we just kind of developed a fast friendship. And I was really interested in just making a film about him. Not really about Bigfoot, but about Marty himself. I was just fascinated by his creative work, his process, and also how he was using Bigfoot. He was taking Bigfoot and into the poetry arena, but in a unique way. I didn't feel like he was writing paranormal poems, necessarily, at least not most of the time, but he was using Bigfoot as a poetic device. And I found that really fascinating. So that's really where it started. So I started filming him, and I just started interviewing him. And we kind of, through this, we just developed our friendship. And it kind of, this was a couple of years ago, a year and a half, I think, when we were filming. So, well, I guess it would have been 2 years ago, because it was the winter. And so I just started filming him, giving readings of his Bigfoot poems around the UP and talking to him. And right when I was about to finish the film, we got an invitation to go to the UP Bigfoot Conference. And a bunch of light bulbs went off, and we said, well, this film could become a lot more interesting. Maybe this isn't just a film about Marty and about poetry. Maybe we actually have to invite the actual Bigfoot into this film. And so we went to this conference, and at this conference, we just met a room, a large room. It was like a small hockey arena, filled with people who were either Bigfoot hunters or paranormal researchers, mediums, experts. Every person in the place was an absolute true believer and had stories and evidence to back up where they were coming from. And all of them were just incredibly gracious to talk with us and let me interview them and ask them and learn more. So really, the film started as a film just about poetry, and then it became a little bit more interesting, I think, and it became about Bigfoot and about people who hunt for mystery. And throughout that process, just talking with Marty and through our interactions, it kind of took on elements of faith and discussing, like Marty has been an organ player for, I think, like 30 years. And one of the places we filmed was in the church where he plays the organ. And we got to talking about issues of faith. And so really what the film ended up being is kind of sitting those three things in a room together: poetry, the search for Bigfoot, the search for mystery, and faith. And so it kind of really became a film that was really unique in the poetry world, but I think also, like you said, the Bigfoot world. You don't see, I was joking with Marty about the film one time, and he said, well, I Googled it. I don't think I've ever seen another film about a poet who writes about Bigfoot, so.
There's something about Bigfoot which does seem to inspire a degree of artistry. The film actually mentions, or Marty mentions, how you almost can't go to a tourist trap in Michigan and not find Bigfoot paraphernalia. But people carve Bigfoot, they paint Bigfoot. They, in Marty's case, which is probably a little bit rarer, they have a whole canon of poetry dedicated to Bigfoot. But I think the second person that you interview after Marty, obviously you come back to Marty again and again because he's your primary subject, but it's a female friend, I forget her name, of Marty's, who does all this type of Bigfoot art as well. So she seems to find this place between the paranormal and art via Bigfoot also.
Yes. Yeah. We had a real unique mix of people that I was able to interview. The person you're talking about, her name is Sarah Still. She lives here in Marquette with Marty and I, and yeah, she's a wonderful artist and also a healer. But she does a lot of work, and she was came to the conference with us. She's actually friends of both Marty and I, and yeah, she's been making incredible art for a long time. So she was just one of the people interviewed. There was other people that were Bigfoot experts. Ken Gerhard, who I believe you mentioned is on your program. Charlie Raymond, who is known as the Kentucky Bigfoot guy. He was up there. And yeah, and also we got to talk with Gideon, who is Marty's son, who writes Yeti poetry. So
Yeah, I wonder, and this is going a little bit more esoteric than filmmaking now, but I wonder if the imagination is more complicated than we think it is, I believe. So I think there's what some thinkers have called maybe the little imagination, which is like, I don't know, daydreaming, for example, or perhaps thinking about something vaguely creative. And then there's the bigger, almost paranormal imagination, where we might enter an imaginal realm which is somehow between this world and the other, and it isn't really either, but it's a space in between which seems realer than this world. And people like Henry Corbin and Patrick Harper have written quite extensively about perhaps paranormal experiences take place in this imaginal reality. But I wonder if people might find creative outlet by just, slightly dipping their foot into the imaginal realm. So they don't do the full journey, because I know Marty says he doesn't say whether he believes or not in Bigfoot. I think the documentary doesn't really say what Marty's position is. He a number of times he kind of equivocates whether he believes or not, but he's able to still experiment with the imaginal through poetry with this other world. And so in a way, he's still partaking in whatever the current, I don't know, paranormal trends are, which include Bigfoot. So it's almost a way creatively you can put one foot into this other world instead of jumping all the way into it.
Yeah, that's a good description. I think one thing that Marty and I, when we were invited to this conference, we both found it really easy to take folks seriously. The same sort of passion, search for mystery that a poet has, they have for Bigfoot and for paranormal activity. And it's not so different from folks who reach for the spiritual realm through their faith. And so that's kind of a shared space they all have, which you can say it's an imaginative space. I think to some it is imaginative. To some it's very very much real. When we first showed Bigfoot and Marty at a poetry festival here in town last year, one thing we noticed that with the audience is there was people on both ends of the spectrum and everywhere in between. There's people that are absolutely watch the film and they don't believe in Bigfoot or anything they can't see, touch, taste, and and to them it was pretty good comedy. It was a Christopher Guest film. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that are not only true believers, but who have had experiences with Bigfoot or the paranormal. And so there's these two kind of polar opposites. And then there's people kind of in the middle that are sort of, for lack of a better word, they're agnostic. They could go either way. They don't know. The evidence is, they're waiting for more evidence. The jury's out. And so I think that when we talk about poetry and the paranormal and spirituality, there's some sense of mystery built in, and I think that's part of the attraction. and it's also part of what gets poets and paranormal people and spiritual people sometimes called crazy. you know. Um,
No, I agree, actually. Did you have an I know you said you didn't start the documentary as a Bigfoot documentary. It was
mm,
originally about the poet, but did you
mm.
have any preconceived ideas about Bigfoot, whether you believed in it or didn't believe in it, or was agnostic before the film? And if so, did it change at all when you went through the journey of making the film?
Mm. I've always been, I think I've always been open in general to Bigfoot. I've never hunted for Bigfoot, but I've always been open, in a general way. Like I'm open to just about anything even if I haven't experienced it, that it very well may be true. Um, and I would say I was even more in some ways. Um, Persuaded's not the word, but more open by being around people who are true believers. And not only that, but hey, we have recordings, we've had experiences, unexplained stuff. I had when I was young, I remember I had a wasn't with Bigfoot, but I had a paranormal experience that I've never been able to explain. Um, I've tried to write about it. I've tried to I've told some people about it, but I don't know what it was. And so I'm definitely more open, just in general, by being around people that believe something that's really was outside of my own realm of experience. Um, so yeah, I think I was just became more open.
Can you tell us a little bit about that paranormal experience you had?
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I can. When I was a child, I would say I was 11 or 12. I was living in this trailer park with my father, and this after my parents were divorced. So we were living in this trailer park, and it happened to be uh, the back end of the trailer park, of our trailer. I mean, um, had the park's basketball courts and playground were our back. So we didn't really have a neighbor. We just had the playground. And one night, I think I was watching, might have been Rocky, but I remember I fell asleep on the couch, and I woke up and the TV was staticking. I don't know, maybe this is the days of VHS, and it was all staticking, and I just opened my eyes, and I saw this incredible light in this shape to this light, like an angelic type shape, and
Wow.
in the curtains, and it came like towards me, and I didn't move. I just watched it, and I watched it, and I watched it, and I don't know if I was afraid or if I was in shock, but I just sat there watching it for seemed like the longest time, and then like a gust of wind, it was gone, and I fell asleep, and I don't know what that was. And so I'm definitely really I'm intrigued by the paranormal and by mysteries. I don't know that I got the nerves to go on a hunt, because I'll probably have panic attacks, if I encounter some ghosts. But I love hearing stories.
No, I love hearing stories too. I've never gone on any kind of paranormal investigation, which I maybe
Mm.
that is because I don't really want to experience something like that either. Now, Marty did talk about also how possibly, and I know you asked Ken Gerhard a little bit about it as well, possibly Michigan or the Upper Peninsula area might be rife with Bigfoot sightings. It might be a part of the
Mm.
world which has more Bigfoot sightings than not anywhere, but than a lot of the rest of the country. Being somebody who lives in the UP, do you hear people's Bigfoot encounters often? Does it come up in conversations ever, or?
At this conference, I heard from quite a few people. one of the people I interviewed in the film, Tammy Krasik, is part of a group that searches Bigfoot and paranormal here in the Upper Peninsula. So I've heard stories from them. Outside of that conference, I had not heard stories, but talking with another person I interviewed, the Kentucky Bigfoot guy, Charlie Raymond, he talked about he has the numbers, and he said, yeah, there's a lot of sightings in the Upper Peninsula. And another person in the film, I believe his name is Stephen Kraft, he talked about an experience with Bigfoot in the Upper Peninsula when he was young, and it kind of inspired his work, what he's doing. You know, he had this experience when he was younger where they had heard this sound, you know, and he described it. They were in a cabin and it like shook the windows, you know, but it was coming from the other side of the lake. So it was like big as an elephant type sound. And I don't believe they ever actually saw Bigfoot, but they looked on some sort of report, and within a couple miles, I believe, of where they were, there had been a sighting of Bigfoot. A Bigfoot had approached some guys in a canoe. And so that inspired him to start this web page and thing that he calls documenting the unknown. So he takes stories from all over the world and documents them with people however they choose to. If they want to do it in written form, if they want to make a podcast or do a video. So that really inspired his work. So that's a couple people that I know who definitely have had sightings, and they talk about them in the film. But outside of that, you know, it's not like I walk around town and people just like come up to me and tell me their Bigfoot stories. But, you know, maybe I'm just not bumping into the right people, because I think there are definitely people who have had encounters here in the town where I live. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, it's almost, and I don't know this, but I'm guessing it's almost a companion piece to the film, your Christmas with Bigfoot album, which you did with your son and in your band Streaking in Tongues, it's called, right?
Yeah. We actually did that with Marty. Our last two albums we've actually recorded with Marty. So we do the music for it, but it's all Marty's writing. And so the first one, we did two the same year. They were both in 2021. And the first one was called Slow Dancing with Bigfoot, which was 15 of Marty's poems with Streaking in Tongues scoring the poetry. And then Christmas with Bigfoot was 3 more of Marty's poems and 3 of Marty's essays. And then the same thing, we scored the music. And then Marty also played music on that one as well, played some organ. And so, yeah, both of these pieces are just really a small section of his larger body of work. So we've been kind of working on projects like this as he's kind of working on his larger manuscript, which he hopes to publish in the near future, I believe, of all of his Bigfoot work. So this is just kind of like little chapters that we put out. So they're full-length albums, but they're kind of just chapters in his larger kind of Bigfoot opus. And so we have another one that's coming out this year, and it's called Jazzin' with Bigfoot. So that'll be the third of the trilogy.
Fantastic. Your biography is extensive. I could only read a little bit about it in the introduction because I'd still be reading it now. You've done so many things. Tell me, how did you do that, the transition into documentary film? Because I don't think that was your background originally, right? Like, what made you go in the documentarian direction?
Yeah. Well, the short answer is, well, I worked for a decade in the theater downstate before I came up here. I've been a director for a long time and a writer. And so I've always had interest in storytelling. And once I started playing in the band with my son, we started making music videos. And so we started doing filming that way. And it was just, I just started learning how to film and edit just to make our music videos and just to learn a new skill. And I was taking a class. I believe it was my first year in graduate school, and in the class, um, we all had to um, participate in this contest called the 3-day novel, and it happens over Labor Day every year. I strongly recommend it if you're a fiction writer. But this
Wow.
3-day novel contest, we all had to try to write a novel in 3 days. And one of the requirements of this class by this great professor named John Billman, his requirement was we had to document our process in some way. And so I had a camera, little $100 camera I had from ABC Warehouse, pretty much the camera I've shot most things on. And I just started filming my process of doing this documentary, or I'm sorry, participating in this novel, writing a novel in 3 days. And so I was holding the camera up and talking to myself, and I was, filming things outside my window, so through that process, I kind of became more intrigued with the film than I did the actual novel I was working on. I was more intrigued with what I was doing than the thing that I was doing. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
And so I started. So that turned into a 55-minute documentary called 3-Day Novice, and that was really my first film. And I only wrote a measly 55 pages for this 3-day novel contest, but I was in a class of multiple people that wrote over 100 pages, and in fact,
Wow.
three of my classmates were finalists that year for this 3-day novel contest. So just incredible. I admire fiction writers greatly. So I really got into it that way, and what I really found that I loved about documentary filmmaking is the chance to learn about something, and so by documenting my process, I really learned more about what it is to be a fiction writer, which I'd really never been, and learning about that, asking questions, and that kind of carried over. And so I ended up doing that film. And then I ended up working on Bigfoot and Marty shortly after that film with Marty, and another film I was hired to do. I did a documentary for we had a big read in Marquette, and so I filmed the events of this big read over 2 months, where we had all these events surrounding. They were all inspired by and Joy Harjo's latest book, which is An American Sunrise. And so there was lots of events led by Native American people or about indigenous issues. And so I made a documentary of that. So I kind of fell into it. It was really John Billman's the blame for the Bigfoot film, because I probably never would have done it if he hadn't made me document something. But I find that I've really enjoyed it. I don't know how many I'll do. I got one more I've committed to after this, the bunch I did for graduate school, and so we'll see. But I really have loved it so far.
I was going to ask you a question you probably couldn't answer because you don't. Obviously, you're your own documentarian, but I have this sense that not everybody making documentaries today has a background in theater or a background in directing. So do you find you bring something to when you make a documentary? Are you conscious of engaging that other aspect of your skill set? Like, are you conscious of, well, maybe this will play better this way, or this will be a better story this way? And one of the reasons I say it is because I notice a lot of YouTube type documentaries, not that there's anything wrong with that, are very image driven. You can tell they're kids, when I say kids, 20-year-olds, whatever, who are super image driven. So it's all about just punching out these, gorgeous slow-mo images. But often I think there's something lacking in the story there. So I'm wondering if the way you come to it as somebody with more of a background in theater, and as you were saying, the novel contest, and in somebody who's taught English and the like, if you're conscious of bringing story to documentary more, perhaps.
Absolutely. Well, two things I want to comment on what you just said. The first is this idea of image, and this idea of beautiful images. Um, I'm really attracted to art that is made on the cheap. You know, um, whether it's music, whether it's film, whatever it is, stuff that's not slick, stuff that's homemade, handmade. So I'm really attracted to that kind of work. And I think part of that is probably inspired by theater because a lot of the plays I directed were directed in a converted space. It used to be a gas station and it was turned into a theater, and very, very blue jeans style. You know what I mean? Um, so so yeah, I'm really, and I think that that's something that maybe gets more and more lost the more high fidelity is um, made available to everyone because nowadays I think with a lot of people like having a high fidelity thing is what's most important. And I don't think that that's true. I think what's most important is like something interesting, a story,
I agree.
inspiration, something. And so like with my all of my films were made with zero budget, for one because I don't have any money, but for two because I think it's a cool challenge. What can you do with nothing? That kind of idea. I'm not the first person to ever think that way, but I definitely am inspired by that. And so, as far as like bringing, do when you work in other art forms, do you bring that to whatever art form you're working on at the time? I think absolutely. Um, that's one of the reasons I enjoy working in other art forms. I mean, I not just like I don't just work in the theater so that my dialogue will be good in my poetry or that I'll think cinematically or whatever. I've worked in these different areas, but I find that yeah, like when I work with in the film, I have a pretty idea what the process of like telling a story, what it's like to work with performers, um, how to do music, and so I can do a lot of things for myself, and one of the reasons that happened is because I was kind of forced to, I tried to collaborate when I was younger and would sometimes like I'd try to do like a recording project or somebody with somebody else or whatever it was, and it wouldn't quite work out, and I couldn't afford to do that, to hire people to do things. So there's like a power in learning how to do things for yourself, and I think that that's one of the great things that documentaries inspire in people is you're asking questions, you're learning for yourself, and that may be all you get from it, but that's enough, And so I think that that's, so I can't help but, bring my experiences from other art forms into my art form. I feel like it gives me unique perspective, but I will say this, anybody that brings any genuine experience brings unique perspective. If you're a plumber, you bring that to your poetry. If you're a teacher, you bring that to your filmmaking, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? So but I think yeah, I think it probably just makes me, I hope, a little bit more versatile, but also like maybe helps me to think outside of the box. Like some people, for example, with poetry, which is what my focus was in graduate school. For some people, when they think of poetry, they think of this is what a poem is. This is a poem. Okay, here's a poem, and here's a poem. This is not a poem. They approach it like that. They have a very clear idea what a poem is, and I'm not like that, and I don't know why. But all I can say is like when I come to poetry, I think more of like, what can a poem be? What can be a poem? you know and it drives me in a little bit different way, so I'm not always kind of trying to peck out what I'm doing or chisel what I'm doing to make it into a poem. sometimes I'm just trying to discover a new form or a new way of doing poetry. So I kind of feel that same sense of freedom and exploration when I'm working in film. So thankfully I had that, or the Bigfoot and Marty film never would have became what it is. It would have become maybe just 1/3 of it, but I had to keep going. And I'm glad I did.
I'm glad you did as well. As I mentioned to you when I first and let you know we were screening, and it was just such a different film. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I can't wait to screen it for our audience at MidWest WeirdFest in March. You said something then, which I think is very important. When I say then, maybe sometime in the last 5 minutes, about learning about something when you make a documentary. And I think that's a very important thing for the filmmaker to stay engaged and be curious about his subject. What was a couple of the main points you think you took away from Bigfoot and Marty? What did you feel like you learned when you made that film?
There's a lot. One of the big things I learned, I would say, one of the most important things is to listen to people better. It seems like such a simple thing. I'm not always a great listener. I tend to be long-winded, and just by listening to people, not only do you get to know people better and you respect them better, and you learn empathy maybe, but I think also you truly learn to maybe see the world or get a glimpse of the world through their eyes. And that definitely happened to me. Not only getting to know Marty better and being able to see how Marty approaches poetry, approaches life, but also all these different folks who follow Bigfoot and follow the paranormal. So that was a huge takeaway for me. And another great takeaway, thinking about Marty again and thinking about all these various Bigfoot hunters and paranormal, none of which claim to have a Bigfoot trapped, or a skeleton or like an actual physical proof. They still are pursuing. They're still hunting. They're still believing. And what was inspiring me about that is like the same way with Marty, like he has been a poet for a long, long time. He's published a book, and he's published the 2 audio books with my band, but he is still not finished his Bigfoot work, which he's been working on for years. And I think one of the things I learned through this process is just it's good to be patient with your dreams. It's good to be patient with your passion. You don't need to rush it. It's going to happen. It's going to unfold as it will, and I think that's true. I see that happening with Marty as he continues to work on this project. It just keeps growing and becoming more of what it's going to be. And all these folks that pursue Bigfoot, by the way, many of which work full-time during the week, and then they hunt Bigfoot full-time during the weekend. That's some real commitment. And whether somebody is doing that as an act of faith, or a church-going person, or they're doing that as they're searching for Bigfoot, or they're a detective trying to capture a killer, you can't help but respect it, and so there was no point where it was ever where I ever felt like we were being disrespectful or lampooning them. We were just listening, and that was what was easy. Now, at times, in the paranormal world, and me being more of a, quote unquote normie who's not around the paranormal stuff all the time, sometimes I'd hear stuff in it, it would be wild to hear. And like, I'd want to laugh, or I'd kind of be like this, but it's not like I'm laughing at them. It's like, it's so outside of my experience. It's like somebody, I remember when I was in church as a kid, and somebody, started talking about an experience they had with an angel, and they, talking and singing with the angels, or speaking in tongues, or, wild stuff happens all the time. And so, it's okay to laugh, I mean, we're only, we might as well have a little joy as we make sense of these mysteries. You know what I mean? So,
That's true. I think some of those points are fascinating, how you drew the parallel between somebody on a poetry or a journey to become a better poet and somebody on the
yeah.
journey to find Bigfoot. I never really thought about that. What I have thought about, though, when it comes to the paranormal, and I do think it ties into that, is we today live in a culture. I've said it a number of times on this show and another show I do Tuesday nights on the paranormal, or Untold radio, rather, called Mysterious Library. And that is that we live at a time where we always want to have this kind of, we want to reach this point of having an answer to the mystery. Like, we need this physical or scientific vindication, whether it's people who chase Bigfoot, they want to get a body or, a hair sample, or whether it's people who believe in aliens, they want to get, that piece of crash source evidence, or they want the government to give them disclosure, or if it's a ghost hunter, they want to have, an irrefutable photograph or EVP recording or something. But it's a very modern idea, this idea of having to solve this mystery. Just in many ways, it's a very modern idea that we have to be successful in poetry, or that there's an endpoint we have to get to. So the idea of having to get the Bigfoot body, or having to be a Pulitzer Prize author, these are kind of fairly modern constructs, which people in the past didn't necessarily pursue. And when I say the past, I don't mean 100 years ago, because they still did then. I mean hundreds of years ago. There wasn't, if we stay on the paranormal for a minute, there wasn't this overarching need to somehow be validated by science, to somehow prove the existence of these things. And I'm sure there were many poets who might have wanted success, but they weren't chasing the dream of, okay, well, I'm going to get I'm going to get whatever the internationally most recognized prize for poetry is. And I think we live in a time where we're much poorer for wanting to have that physical manifestation of whether it's success or whether it's the mysteries we've chased. I think sometimes it's the journey, the mystery itself, which is what's of most value. And I don't know if that's something, it sounded like that's almost similar to what you were saying, but just coming at it from a different angle, perhaps.
Yeah, I like that, the journey. That's success. Enjoying the journey. Enjoying the work. Enjoying what you're doing. I mean, whatever you're doing. I mean, you think about what you said. What is success to some people? Pulitzer Prize. Joy Harjo, who won the Pulitzer Prize. We had a reading for her during the big read. She was part of the big read.
Oh, wow.
And the room was not even full. We're talking about Joy Harjo here, the highest. And so what that makes me think is that a lot of people would really like to have a Pulitzer Prize, but why would they like to have that? If it's so important, why don't they come to the reading for the person who's the Pulitzer Prize? You know what I'm saying? I think we live in a culture where people want to be on a trophy. They want to have a trophy. They want to be famous. They want to be adored or whatever, whatever. But as far as people being able to deal with that ambiguity, I think that's a big important thing in life. Think about faith. Not many believers you will talk to will say, I had a blinding light on the Damascus road and I was blinded and I heard the voice of God, and then I could see again and it changed their life. They have to deal with ambiguity. And so poets had to deal with ambiguity, not just in search of a poem, but in search of, what am I doing with my life? Why do all these people think I'm, why does my family, why are they praying for me because I've chosen this, I'm an artist, I must be crazy. It doesn't make any money, blah, blah, et cetera, whatever. I think that's part of something people have to deal with. And I think that's you're very unhappy if you don't, or you're very neurotic, like if you have to hear the voice of God, the audible voice of God, then a lot of people would not be believers. If you have to, have a really clear picture of Bigfoot, or you have to have be able to see and touch, an actual Bigfoot, then a lot of people may not pursue Bigfoot. If you're the only person, if your couple friends are the only people that ever read your poetry, are you still going to write your poetry? Does it still mean something enough to you that you want to keep going down this road? And I think two things will happen. People will either find joy in the work and live with the ambiguity, or they become very, very unhappy,
Mm-hmm.
And so,
yeah, I think that applies across all of life, the paranormal, poetry, and everything else. We forget to, it's almost a cliche to say, to live in the moment, but it's so true. People plan. I'm guilty of it. We all are. There's an event we have to do or get ready for, but life happens in those moments in between those events. And they're the things I think you'll really think about when it comes to the end. Geez, that's bleak. Anyway, let's hit a question from one of our regular viewers and listeners, Nancy Malcolm, who's just wonderful. Her question is, was there a particular event that prompted Marty to write poetry about Bigfoot?
I'm not sure. That's a good question for Marty. I'm sure he's told me and I've forgotten. I mean, we've had so many conversations. I can't remember everything, but I do know one tidbit that I can give. So I know that writing about Bigfoot really opened up Marty's writing just in general by, so for example, I don't know where it came from, but he wrote this poem, which is featured in the film, called 13 Ways of Looking at Bigfoot. And he talks about this a little in the film too, about how writing about 13 Ways about Looking at Bigfoot, he was able to look at Bigfoot from 13 different ways, and by doing that, it really, I guess, opened up the possibilities in his own writing, in his own way of not only expressing himself, but I think in how to use Bigfoot as a vehicle for his expression, and so, but I'm not sure if there was a poem that really ignited it or not. I'm not sure about that. That is a good question, but I do know that the way that Marty incorporates Bigfoot into his poetry is manyfold. There's not just one way. I will say one way that he definitely doesn't. I've read dozens of his Bigfoot poems now and performed many with him, and there's never one time where his poem was kitschy, or was like so many people that like a Bigfoot bumper sticker. That's not how his poetry is. What you find when you approach Marty's poetry, you not only find Bigfoot, but you find a very serious, intelligent, and creative mind at work and heart, within his work. Bigfoot sometimes is a voice, I think, that sounds a little bit like Marty. Like maybe Bigfoot is in Marty's family. Maybe Bigfoot is Marty's friend. Maybe Bigfoot is Marty's wife. At different times, this comes out in his poetry, but it's never like Bigfoot is, like Buddy Jesus or something. You know what I mean? So.
And here's a picture of Marty from the film's poster for those of you who mightn't be aware of Marty yet. What I love about it is you obviously know him intimately. I know him from the documentary. That's as well as I know him. But he talks about how Bigfoot almost stands in for these kind of troubles in life. Like everybody has a Bigfoot in their life. Everybody has this thing that they're always conscious of, but is just out of sight, or you can't, you can glimpse it in the tree line, but you can't get a look at it, but you're always kind of aware of it. And I think he mentions death being like Bigfoot, or perhaps a crisis being like Bigfoot, or something weighing on you being like Bigfoot. And I thought that was just a fascinating approach, just as an aside.
Yeah,
how to
and really
utilize Bigfoot.
I think that's really some of his approaches, and he has more too. But yeah, absolutely. I think when you think about what is Bigfoot, is Bigfoot the mystery at the edge of the woods? Is Bigfoot the answer to our question? What's the Bigfoot? Why did mom die of cancer? That's a Bigfoot, right? Um, so what is there a God? That's a Bigfoot. I think so. It's really an exploration of the existential, but also it's an explore. Marty doesn't just explore the existential; he explores common things like everyday stuff like how to treat your family and mourning a friend and etc. So um, he gets a lot of mileage out of Bigfoot, I will say that.
It's interesting because I know Marty actually, my understanding is he's a family man, he has family and things, but he seems like this almost he almost seems like that classic poet who would just live alone and just think about these type of things all the time. Like he comes across as a very sensitive and very insightful human being that you almost can't imagine doing anything else but thinking about these big things, and then you see him playing the organ in church and you're like, hey, he does other things except think about Bigfoot. And I suppose that's a cultural almost, I don't know, idea of what a poet is, somebody who's totally removed, but he's immersed in the real world, but still creating this wonderful poetry.
Yeah, well, you mentioned earlier, that I had this long bio and all these experiences. Marty's the same way, and his is even longer. Marty has done so much from poetry. He's done work in theater, and so that's one of the reasons I think we clicked so quickly, is because we share a lot of interests and we have a lot of the same passions. But yeah, Marty absolutely, is a fantastic artist in a number of ways. But he's not. I know he works. He can, and he does work in solitude. But he's also profoundly active in our community. Like he's the director of programming for the largest library in the Upper Peninsula. So he is like on the front lines of like planning stuff, doing stuff just to serve the community. And so he's kind of a rare mix. When you think of poet, do you think of Emily Dickinson in a room, or Edgar Allan Poe in a ditch, or whatever. Right. But no, he's unique and memorable and extraordinary in a number of ways.
So I love this film. There was another doco out there. I know you say you're getting ready to do something else, but is there anything else which seems like way out, that you haven't approached yet, but you would love to if you had the opportunity as a documentarian?
Oh, another documentary.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple that are kind of, one is definitely a go. I'm working on a documentary about a spiritual founder in the church that I grew up in, and a dear friend and colleague of mine downstate. He was my boss for many years, but he's kind of like a father figure to me and just a dear friend. So he's written this script, and we're going to be doing a film this summer about that. And it's kind of becoming a historical piece, but also kind of about the process of people telling stories and using theater. And I'm kind of sort of have been doing some filming on this wonderful band named Wawayea that plays here in the Upper Peninsula. They're a Native American band, and my son and our band Streaking in Tongues played some shows with them, and I just thought they were extraordinary. And so I approached them and said, "Hey, would it be okay if I made a film about you all? I would love to just help share your music and your vision with people that maybe haven't had a chance to hear it." And they said, "Oh yeah, that sounds good, but why don't you come play play music with it. Why don't you join our band?" And I
Oh,
was
wow.
thinking, "Why do you play guitar?" And I said, "Well, you already got two great guitar players. What can I do?" But there was an empty drum kit sitting over in the corner, and so I hopped on the drums, and since then I've been drumming with this band. And so I don't know what that'll mean for a film about them, but it may get more interesting. So now I'm this weird dude that wanted to do a film about them, but now I'm playing in the band with them, and I'll call them dear friends now. So,
Oh, wow.
but I'm hoping to still do the film about them, and maybe it just got a little more interesting now that the filmmaker joined the band.
Well, I think that's one of the wonderful things about documentaries is the filmmaker or the documentarian really has to find what the key protagonist is through there. Maybe it'll be you in this one. Maybe it'll be actually you joining the band and your experiences.
Oh, I doubt it. I hope not. I don't want to. I don't want to make that film. No, I'm definitely not. I'm more in a supporting role in this band, but I'll tell you what. There's a lot of interesting characters in this band, and I say that affectionately, not that they're eccentric. Maybe they are eccentric. I think most artists are. I'm a little eccentric, I suppose, maybe, but anyway, they're just a wonderful, wonderful group. Is there some more questions?
Yeah, there's Horace Smith he's a professor emeritus at Michigan State University of astronomy and of physics. He's been a guest on the show and he's a regular listener.
Okay.
And he asked, it is a very different type of movie, but are you familiar, Ronnie, with how do you pronounce it?
Escanaba in the Moonlight.
Yeah, in the Moonlight. I'm familiar with
it.
it. Yeah, I've seen it. Great. Did you like that movie?
Yeah, that was a play that Jeff Daniels wrote that premiered at the Purple Rose down in Chelsea, Michigan, and then it became the film. Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I think to some people, maybe there will be a little bit of a connection there with this film too. That it has a little bit of a sense of humor. It deals with mystery in the pursuit of that, and it deals with the upper Michigan here too. So one of the people in our film, Tammy, is actually from Escanaba and does her paranormal work out of Escanaba. So, yeah.
Thankfully, you were here to pronounce it. I've even seen the movie and didn't even know how to pronounce Escanaba. So now I do. That's a spectacular film as well. Anybody who hasn't seen it should watch Escanaba in the Moonlight. And it rings true even in Wisconsin because our deer hunting opening, like gun opening weekend here is such a big deal. Like where I live, there are just the rest of the year, I'm sure they couldn't get away with, but there's trucks driving around with guys in camo hanging, or actually blaze orange usually hanging out the back. And it's just every gas station, every store has welcome deer hunters. It's such a big deal. So while I don't live in the Upper Peninsula, I still get the kind of the buck fever that's presented in that film, funnily enough. So how do people get a hold of any of your materials, or do you have some websites? So like if they want to listen to Christmas with Bigfoot, or if they want to see what you're up to, is there somewhere they should go to check that out?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they can find both of the Bigfoot albums, Slow Dancing with Bigfoot and Christmas with Bigfoot. You can find them. The best way, I suppose, go to streakingintongues.com, which is our band page. And from there, you can listen to all the albums, on Bandcamp. But also you can find it if you just find Streaking in Tongues on Spotify, iTunes, all that kind of stuff. You can find not only those two albums, but all the music that we've done as well to this point. And so those are the two that we did with Marty and with Jazz and too. So yeah, streakingintongues.com is the best place. Or just look us up, Streaking in Tongues on like Spotify or whatever.
And I'd obviously encourage anybody who lives within driving distance, or even maybe make a weekend of it, come to Eau Claire, Wisconsin. It's a wonderful college town. It's an awful lot of fun. First weekend of March, which is March 4 to 6 in the downtown Eau Claire Micon Cinema, which is an awesome cinema. There'll be lots of filmmakers there. I believe you're coming, Ronnie, to introduce your film as well at the festival.
Yeah, I'm sure hoping to. I'm sure hoping to. I'm hoping to come down there with my son, and I'm hoping Marty and maybe Marty's son will be able to come as well too. So
Fantastic. Well, you were just such an amazing guest. I had so much fun talking to you. I hope you do get to the fest so I can talk to you again there. And until I get to chat to you again sometime soon, and everybody else who's been watching and listening to this episode, keep it weird.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one, Dean.